has one very interesting law that when you spritz the water on the person who is impure, then he becomes pure. But you who spritzed, you become impure. Right? Why would that be? You're taking the pure stuff and you're spritzing on the guy, you're making him okay, and you're the one who now becomes impure for the day. Right? Because that's what happens in life. You know, when you work with somebody who's not on what's your level, whatever it is, you have to go down to a different level and understand. I could tell you some interesting stories that shaykh to the Pora Aduma, because what I was introduced to were young men just out of high school, just out of college. They came to learn, they were being introduced to Yiddishkeit. Their backgrounds were nothing. No connection at all to Yiddishkeit. Nothing. So here I am, a guy, I grew up in a modern Orthodox home, and I got into Hasidus when I was in 7th grade. I had a Rebbe, my father-in-law, who was my teacher at Breslov, and that's when I got into Breslov. And you may say I grew in Breslov, you may say that, maybe I'm still the same guy I was then, but whatever the story, these guys had nothing. So they come to yeshiva and they're starting to learn, and I have to now relate to them, right? One of the things, Baruch Hashem, I was able to learn very early on was that I can't give advice to the person until I find myself knowing where he's coming from. Because they used to ask me all kinds of questions. And okay, Baruch Hashem, somehow I knew the answer. But why was he asking me the question? What bothered him about this facet of life that he had to ask this question this way, right? So I had to ask the boys whenever they came into yeshiva, I'd ask them a little background, just to understand where this kid is coming from. One kid came there. I knew him, a nice kid. He was there for about 3 months, 4 months. Finally, one day he opened up. He had to run to yeshiva because he came home one day, his father was hitting his mother with a hammer. Right? Not a very healthy situation. What do you do? I never faced something like that before. Now I have to face it. What do you say to a kid like that? And other kids who came from worse backgrounds, right? And this was before the LGBT movement became powerful. And there were things, and the things that I learned from them, I thank Hashem for having been able to learn from them that no two people are alike. Everyone is very different. Everyone has a different background. Everyone has a different neshama. Every person, there's no one solution that fits everybody. There is no, right? It's general, yeah, but not specific. Each one is a special neshama, and they were beautiful kids. So little by little, I started learning what life was all about. So I thank Hashem that I was introduced to the Baal Tshuva movement when I was ripe enough to be able to learn from them, and I was ripe enough to be able to contribute to it. And Baruch Hashem, I think it helped. I think so. Entrepreneur, I don't know. But what happened was I used to speak to them and I would mention something of Rabbi Nachman. And they would say to me, I heard of Rabbi Nachman but I have no access to what he says, which was true. There was only one book in English, Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom, that was available then. But they wanted to study Rabbi Nachman's stories with him. There was nothing available. So Baruch Hashem, we made it available. I thank Hashem for that ability, for that capability, for that merit. Okay, we're talking about Parshat Chukas, which, as we mentioned earlier, the Parah Aduma. The Parah Aduma was, as Rashi brings in the Parsha, he says it's a parable of a child who was in the palace of the king. He's an infant, right? And he makes on the floor, right? What do? Call its mother and let the mother clean up the mess, right? That's what you do. So the Jews served a calf. So now they have to call a Parah Aduma, a cow, red heifer they call it, but it's a red cow, that should come and purify for the child, clean up that child, which is what the Parah Aduma is all about. And it cleans up. It takes the worst kind of impurities and it makes the person clean from those impurities. Interesting, the Medrash on this parsha says, they asked Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai, how is it possible for the water, which was mixed with a little bit of some kind of leaf and a few things, how is it possible that it could make pure a person who's impure? Right? Right? That's what the whole Parah Aduma, you burn it and you mix it together, and then it's... Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, and this is one of the most fundamental ideas that we have to learn in Yiddishkeit. He said, who told you that the person was impure to start with? What made the person impure? So what did he do? He touched a dead body. Okay, where's the impurity? Reason for it, right? The menstrual blood becomes the milk in the body that feeds the child, that sustains the child. That's one of the purposes of it, right? So it's a means that it could become pure. It could feed a child, sustain a child, and whatnot. Whatever. There's a lot of different things. The main thing is what Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai said, that who told you there's impurities that you have to make pure? The Torah. The power of Torah is such that it runs every part of our life. The Torah preceded the world. The Gemara says, the Medrash says, 2,000 years prior to the creation, Hashem created the Torah. By Hashem, there's no question of time. Today, tomorrow, yesterday, 1,000 years, it doesn't matter. It's all the same by Hashem. It's all current. Hashem created the Torah 2,000 years prior. The Torah preceded the world. The Torah was used, as the Medrash says, as a blueprint to create the world. So that everything that's in the world could be found in the Torah. Everything. So if we accept the Torah, we have a reason for every single thing in this world. Because the Torah is the blueprint. The blueprint has everything that you're going to have in the building afterwards. If you have that, if you don't have the Torah, then there's always questions in life, and questions that have no answers. They have absolutely no answers. So the Koyach HaTorah, and that's why it says in this week's Parsha, it's Chukas starts off chapter 19 in Numbers, in Bamidbar, right? Pasuk 14 says, Zois HaTorah, Odom Ki Yomus Ba'oil. This is the Torah, the laws of a person who passes away, and these are the laws of purity and impurity and so on and so forth. The Gemara says, Zois HaTorah, Odom. Man is the Torah. The Torah could manifest within the person himself. Torah has 613 mitzvahs. Man has, it's comprised of 248 positive commandments, 365 prohibitive commandments, right? Man has 248 limbs. They're listed in the Mishnah in Oholos. And a person has 365 sinews and veins and whatnot that go through the body. This is a Gemara at the end of Makos, so that a person is compared to the days of the year and is compared to 248 words, which is the spear, the Romach, Reish Mem Ches is 248. That's the spear with which we can fight our battles. By doing the mitzvahs, we have a Romach, a spear, which will come up at the end of next week's Parsha, Pinchas, a Bolak, so the end of Bolak, that Pinchas took a sword, a spear, and so on. So that's the 248 words. That was Krishma, and so on. So the idea behind the Parah Aduma, it takes those who are pure and makes them impure. And then it takes those that are impure and makes them pure. Right? So the Gemara says, and Reb Nosson brings this in the Kut Halachos, he says, you'll notice that the Parah Aduma is Kol Ma'aseho Bachutz. Everything that was done with the Parah Aduma is outside the Temple Mount. Not on the Temple Mount, but outside, opposite on Har HaZeisim. Right? They would stand opposite the entrance, but they would slaughter the animal there, they would burn it there, and so on. Everything outside. Why? Why is that? Well, a couple of weeks ago in the Kut Halachos, I think it was, we mentioned about the sparks of holiness that exist throughout the world, right? These sparks of holiness are from creation. We have what we call the Shriras Kelim, the shattering of the vessels, right? So that the vessels ended up as sparks of holiness in many places. Adam, when he ate from the tree, spread the sparks further and added new sparks, right? Now these sparks are all over the world, and therefore something has to be able to reach them in order to be able to bring them back. Where did the vessel come from? It's the handiwork of Hashem. Therefore, you can't say it's impure or it's away from Hashem, it's lost to Hashem, or whatnot. There are certain cases like Bilam, we'll meet him next week, right? Or you have other cases, Balak, the Zoya has pages upon pages, the impurities of these people. Esav, you have the wicked people throughout history, but the sparks of holiness have to be redeemed, right? There are sparks of unholiness that people make and they become unholy, like Bilam and Balak and whatnot. And the Arizal once said he had to work many hours to try to rectify Bilam and he couldn't do it. Whatever, there are certain types of evil that have to be eradicated completely. But that was created by man with his deeds. Anything that was created by Hashem ultimately has to come back into the Kedusha. It has to. That's all the sparks of humanity, all the sparks of the Jews who are so far from Hashem, right? And they have to come back to Hashem, and they will come back to Hashem. So that's why you have to have something like the Parah Aduma, something that can purify even the worst type of impurity. It can purify it, right? But it has to be done outside. You can't work it within. Rabbi Nachman has a very interesting lesson on this, lesson 91 in the second part of Kutam Moran. But he speaks there about why you find tzaddikim, and this is Rabbi Nachman over 200 years ago. He says, we see many tzaddikim, they're involved with wicked people, right? They're involved with, and they sit down, they talk to them. Rabbi Nachman himself played chess with some of the leading maskilim, leading men of the Enlightenment in his time. Others, the Baal Shem Tov, others, you see them speaking, they're talking about the wars that are taking place, like now, Russia, Ukraine. They would sit and talk about the war, the battles. In Rabbi Nachman's time, there was Napoleon who was fighting all over Europe, right? You had other wars, the Baal Shem Kodesh lived in the early 1700s. There were wars going on then. They had the 100 Years' War then, I believe, or the 30 Years' War, whatever went on in Europe. They sit down and talk about the wars. They talk about different things. They knew about the theaters. Where did these tzaddikim come to talk about such materialistic things, such earthly things, right? He says, because there are sparks of holiness in every single thing that we encounter. Every single thing. You may have heard the words, Ma'aseh Merkava, the chariot of Hashem, right? In the first chapter of Yechezkel, it talks about a chariot of Hashem. It's the Haftorah on Shavuos. There's a chariot of Hashem. And then, throughout Europe, till 100 years ago when they had the cars, right, people used to travel with horse and buggy, right? Horse and buggy. So someone once said to me, I have a car. I could drive it, and I can give someone a lift. I could do Maaseh Merkava, a chariot of Hashem. I could do a favor for someone with my car. Or I could be just a regular balagola, a guy who runs the wagon and just go from place to place and do nothing with my life. All I'm doing is I know how to drive a wagon, right? It's up to you. The sparks are there, whatever we do. So it comes out. It's Bobby. Just tell him I'm going to give you 1 o'clock, 1:30. Whatever I do, I can make a mitzvah out of it. Just by not doing a sin. Just by not doing a sin. Just by not impurity myself, make a sin. It's off. So what we have to do, what we have to learn from the Parah Aduma is that, yes, we all have to engage in the mundane. We all have to, right? There's always something mundane that comes up in my life, right? If you have to get dressed, is it a mitzvah? Well, if you're getting dressed because you want to honor Hashem and daven with being dressed, not stark naked, whatever, yeah, it's a mitzvah. Getting dressed is a mitzvah. Eating breakfast is a mitzvah, right? You have to go shopping, pick up something for the house so that people can have what to eat. It's a mitzvah. It depends what your attitude is in everything that you do. There's a Sif in Shulchan Aruch, or Orach Chaim, is the weekday halachos. It has Shabbos and Yom Tov too. But Siman Reish Lamed Aleph, the number 231, is one paragraph, one Sif. It says everything the person does should be l'shem shamayim. Do it with Hashem in mind. If whatever you're doing, any mundane thing that you do, if you do it with Hashem in mind, it becomes a mitzvah. It becomes a mitzvah. And you can rectify the sparks of holiness. You can somehow draw those sparks that apply to your soul, and you can make it into holiness. Which is why some people are born in Eretz Yisrael. Some people are born in Egypt, some in Turkey, some in Siberia, some in Alaska, some in South America, right? Why? I'm a Jew. Shouldn't I be here in Eretz Yisrael, right? But there are sparks of holiness spread throughout the world. We have the power to attach them, join them, bring them into the realm of holiness by doing a mitzvah. Just by doing the mitzvah. You say a bracha, right? Rabbi Nachman says here, he brings an interesting Rashi. Yaakov Avinu, the Gemara says, Gemara in Shabbos, Yaakov Avinu should have been brought to Egypt in iron chains because he didn't want to leave Eretz Yisrael. It's enough that he left it when he went to Lovin, right? When he went to Iraq. He says, why should I have to go out now? Except that he had merits, so he went without the chains. Somebody came to Rabbi Nachman and he asked him, I have a trip to make. I'm supposed to be traveling to such and such a place. Should I make the trip or not? Rabbi Nachman said, don't fight it. If you don't have to, you don't have to. But if you have to make the trip, make the trip. Why? If not, maybe they'll have to bring you there in chains. Why would they have to do that? Because there are sparks there that belong to you. And you, by just saying a bracha, you elevate those sparks. See how powerful we are? Wow. Amazing, huh? See how powerful we are? Things that we can do by doing a mitzvah, making a bracha. It's incredible. So that's the part of the parsha that speaks about the Parah Aduma. Then we have the next part speaks about the passing of Miriam. Right? Miriam passed away. They had no water. Why? Because all the water, imagine this, 600,000 men plus the women and children, the Erev Rav, whoever, that's a few million people, right? They were in a desert, right? They were in a desert. How do you feed, how do you give drink to a few million people? 40 years. How do you give them water? But right after they left Egypt, they had no water. So Moshe Rabbeinu struck the rock and water came out. That's what Hashem told him to do. The water, that was the original, by the way, the original Rolling Stone. Right? You remember the Rolling Stones, right? That was the original Rolling Stone. It rolled with them through the desert. It followed them wherever they made an encampment, it stopped. And then the leaders of the tribes would come and hit it with a stick, and they would draw the staff, along a path that would bring the water to their tribe, so that nobody had to go to the stone. The water was right there by their tribe. This is an absolute miracle. All this was in the merit of Miriam. Miriam, one single lady, right? She had enough merit to bring water 40 years in the desert to the Jewish nation, right? She passed away. No more water, right? The Gemara says later on the water came back because of Moshe and Aaron. And then when Aaron passed away, he was the cause of the clouds of glory, which they have in this week's Parsha too. And when he passed away, the clouds of glory disappeared, and they came back because of Moshe's merit was so great, he was able to actually bring it all together. There's a lot of commentaries. Why didn't he do it himself in the beginning? He needed the power of the other tzaddikim to help him. Once it came down, he was ready to do it. Once they wanted to give these tzaddikim the power of what they had. Each one, whatever the case is, Miriam was the cause of water. They had no water, so they started arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi Nachman says it was called a be'er. A be'er is a well, right? That's what the word be'er means. You have a well, you draw water from it. Rabbi Nachman explains the story when Miriam, who is Miriam? Miriam is every one of us. Right? Reb Nosson explains that this really speaks about the greatest tzaddikim, but then he explains that it applies to every single Jew. It's an amazing commentary. Miriam is the bitterness from the word mar, bitter, that every Jew suffers during his lifetime. Everyone has a level of bitterness that affects them. That's Miriam, right? And Miriam dies, goes away. What happens? The waters that were able to bring life to people, also it's lacking. What is that be'er? Be'er in Hebrew also means to explain. It's called the Bi'urei HaTorah, the commentaries of the Torah. We said earlier by the red heifer that it has to be the power of I don't want to.
You what?
It has to be the power of Torah that guides us, that really runs everything behind us. So the be'er, the well, is really from the word ba'er, to explain the Torah, right? The Jew suffers in life. The suffering is made in order to be able to grow, right? I'll give you a thought, right? It's an amazing thought. I thought it was amazing anyway. The Torah says, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jews in Egypt, I'm going to bring you to a land that's flowing with honey, right? Milk and honey, right? Milk and honey. In Parshat Chukas, Deuteronomy 8, yeah, it says, Hashem, I'm going to bring you to a land that has springs and water, and it drinks, it has all kinds of different fruits and everything. I'm going to bring you to the beautiful land, right? This is what's going to be your homeland. Okay. In Parshas Matzorah, right? Leviticus what? Leviticus 14, 15. Leviticus 15. Right? Hashem says, Ki savoyo el eretz moshvosichem, when you come to the land where you're going to live, v'nosati neged tzoras b'veis eretz achuzaschem, I'm going to inflict your homeland with leprosy. Hey, what's going on? Milk and honey? You're going to have beautiful springs, healthy springs. You know, they have up in the Galil, they have in a few other places. I mean, beautiful, healthy springs. The Yam HaMelach. I'm going to give you beautiful, and I'm going to inflict you with leprosy. So what kind of favor are you doing for me? You're bringing me to such a land, and you tell me beforehand that you're going to inflict me with leprosy? Rashi on the spot says, right, what kind of tidings is this for the Am Yisrael? What kind of news is this? Except that for the years before, the Canaanites knew that the Jews were coming to the land of Israel, and they would take it over. And they were going to do battle, whatever they could. But what they do with all their money, they hid it in the houses. They hid it in the walls. They had walls, they made another layer, a hidden wall, whatever the case is. All these detective stories, you have these hidden places. And then that's where they hid all their gold and silver and rubies, whatever they had. So Hashem is telling them, I will inflict leprosy so that you will have to now dismantle that part of the house, and there you will find the treasures that the Canaanites hid in your homes, right? That's what the tidings were all about. You're going to have the Canaanites. Canaan represents the klipos, the forces of impurity. That's what the Canaanites represent, right? And they hide every drop of kedusha, all the sparks of everything that's good is all concealed and covered up by the klipos, by the impurities, right? Hashem says, I'm going to inflict you with leprosy, and through that leprosy, which is also considered a very difficult type of impurity, I'm going to inflict you with that, but through that, you're going to find the treasures, right? And that's what it is with everything in life. So Miriam represents the bitterness that people go through in life. The bitterness is made for us to grow, Right? I saw a very beautiful quote yesterday, just yesterday. Recovery is hard. Talking about the 12 steps, those who are alcoholics or drug addicts or gamblers, whatever the case is. Recovery is scary. That was the words. Recovery is scary because you got to go through a lot just to wean yourself from all of that. But remaining the same, right? No. The recovery part is meant for us to grow. The inflictions, the suffering that we go through is made for us to look for the Ba'er Torah, for the translations, explanations of the Torah, in order for us to be able to go forward in life, in order for us to be able to build. This is incredible. That's the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So he hit the rock. He was supposed to speak to it, right? And he hit the rock. Because of that, he didn't get to Eretz Yisrael. Because of that. One thing Moshe Rabbeinu did that says it was wrong. One thing. But because of that, he didn't merit to get to Eretz Yisrael, right? We are here in Eretz Yisrael today. We all have the ability, no matter where we live, anywhere in the diaspora, to come to Eretz Yisrael. Now is the time for us to be able to start building Eretz Yisrael. And look how Eretz Yisrael is getting built, right? We have a schus that even Moshe Rabbeinu, as great as he was the greatest, even he didn't have. We have it, right? Let's take advantage of it. The next, this parsha is filled with the stories. Sichon and Og at the end of the thing. They were giants, right? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have any problem fighting with Sichon. He stood against them. Okay, he went out and beat them. Og was his bigger brother. Og, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. Why was he afraid? He just beat Sichon. They were two giants, two mighty warriors. What are you afraid of? Right? No, because Og lived a few hundred years. He was a few hundred years old. When Avraham heard that Lot was captured, his nephew Lot, Og was the one who told him. Og. He had one merit that he told Avram that he was that Lot was captured. Avram Avinu went straight out to do battle with the four kings who beat the five kings, right? He did. He wasn't afraid, right? Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid because Og had a merit. Og had one merit. The Zohar says, what was that merit? That since he was a right-hand man to Avram at that time, so he had a connection to chesed, to kindness. He had some kind of connection. And because of that, right, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of him. So take a look. This is a few hundred years later. A few hundred years, because he lived Avram, then you had Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Jews went down to Egypt, then they came out. It's a period of 400 years, right? Over, you did one chesed, but look how powerful the mitzvah of chesed is. You do a kindness to a Jew, kindness to anyone, really. Do a kindness, an act of kindness, it could last for how many generations? Right? That's what the end of the parsha tells us. That's how it ends off. Yeah. Right? Okay? Next week, whatever, but I hope you'll excuse us, but we got to go.